The color-changing ability of chameleons is arguably one of the most famous animal adaptations on Earth, morphing from plain green to a vibrant array of colors and patterns in a matter of seconds. The purpose of this real-life superpower may seem fairly obvious: to instantly disappear into any background to ambush prey and avoid predators. But camouflage is not its main function. Chameleon color changing serves a much more complex role in the lives of these lizards. Though they're only native to a few remote habitats, some chameleon species have been translocated literally across the globe. And despite being thrust into totally foreign ecosystems thousands of miles from home, these insane reptiles don't just tolerate, but dominate their new environment. Chameleons are among the most arboreal of all reptiles, spending nearly their entire lives high up in trees. They are unmatched hunters in the canopy, and they have conquered this challenging ecosystem with some shocking and fascinating adaptations. But how have chameleons become so successful in so many unfamiliar habitats? What makes them such dominant arboreal predators? And what are they actually doing when they change colors? Today, we're gonna show you. Chameleons are highly specialized reptiles, but they've become successful in a surprising variety of habitats. Found throughout much of Africa as well as parts of Europe and Asia, we typically associate chameleons with tropical and subtropical forests, but some species have adapted to harsher, more arid environments like savannas and deserts. Veiled chameleons, for example, are native to a narrow band of the Arabian Peninsula between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Not exactly the easiest place to visit. However, tonight we have a lead on a spot to find these incredible lizards much closer to home. My name is Evan, and this is Harrison. We're twin brothers on a mission to make you an insider in the natural world. And we believe that the best way to understand an animal's life story is to learn how and why its strangest features actually work. We've been wanting to cover chameleons since we started this channel, but since we only film animals in the wild, we haven't had the chance yet. That is, until we learned of a population of veiled chameleons that has colonized an agricultural area in southern Florida. Chameleons are diurnal animals and sleep through the night, and the dense vegetation at this spot gives them the perfect cover to do that. To find them, we're scanning the trees and bushes to spot chameleons asleep on the branches, and though that seems simple enough, we're still looking for little green lizards in a huge sea of green leaves. Luckily, we were joined by our good friend and fellow wildlife educator Spencer Hoffman, and with an extra set of experienced eyes, it didn't take long to spot our first chameleon. Or our second, for that matter, because not 10 minutes after Spencer caught the first one, we saw another sitting low in the vegetation.
Oh, haha, here's one.
No way.
Oh, wow, this is so much easier than I thought it would be. I thought you'd be way up in the canopy. Hey, buddy. Hi.
Oh, I see him.
I'm just gonna be very gentle. Let him kind of walk right onto my hand here. That is a veiled chameleon. No way. I cannot believe that we are holding live wild chameleons right now. These are veiled chameleons. Now we can tell that these are quite young individuals, really just based on their size. Veiled chameleons can push 40 to 60 centimeters in length. Right, that's just about 2 feet long at a maximum size. But there's one very interesting thing that we've noticed about these animals. At least this one is definitely a male. This one here could maybe be a female. The patterning is a little bit indistinct, but this guy with his really prominent yellow stripes that he was displaying especially brightly when Evan first caught him is a dead giveaway that we are looking at a little male. Males typically have more striping, brighter coloration to the stripes, and they'll display a darker coloration when they're really upset, like he was when we first caught him, but they really have both seemed to calm down pretty considerably at this point. Now, a question that I imagine a lot of people have right now is, why are there chameleons here in Florida? How did this even happen, that these animals from halfway across the world are living completely wild in the United States? And as with so many of the invasive species here in Florida, the answer comes right right back to the pet trade. Exactly. The chameleons here are released pets. People got rid of them, they weren't interested in keeping them anymore, and as so often happens, they just chuck them right out into the wild. And here in Florida, the conditions are so good for these animals that they've been able to form a bit of a stronghold here. There are certain areas where you can see there are lots of babies around, and where you're seeing babies, that means there's a good, healthy population of adults that are breeding. So for these guys to be here definitely means that there are more than just these two out here.
But how are veiled chameleons doing so well here in the first place? Florida is very different from their native ecosystem, with many challenges they don't have to face back home. And it's not just the environment here that makes their survival difficult. Veiled chameleons don't live very long, only 6 to 8 years in the wild. That's not a lot of time to establish a healthy population of reptiles, but they overcome this with a crazy reproduction cycle. Females can lay up to 85 eggs in a single clutch, and they will breed as many as 3 times per year, meaning that each individual can potentially produce over 250 offspring annually. On top of this incredible breeding rate, veiled chameleons develop just as fast once they hatch. Newborns can grow up to 2 orders of magnitude in body mass, 100 times their original size, within their first year of growth. And this rapid development allows females to reach sexual maturity at just 4 to 5 months old. Also, chameleons can't disperse very far from where they were born, as they're much better at moving through the treetops than over the ground. So in just a few generations, there will be hundreds of individuals inhabiting a relatively small area. The combination of multiple annual breeding cycles, extremely fast development, and low dispersal means that it only takes a couple years for a population of veiled chameleons to explode exponentially, even if the founding population was small. And that's exactly what happened here in Florida.
All throughout these trees behind us, there are a bunch more of these guys. And that's where they're going to be spending the majority of their time. Veiled chameleons, as with most of their family, are arboreal. So they're living up in the trees. These guys are perfectly evolved for a life entirely in the canopy. So you can see this little one has its tail basically wrapped around my finger. And that is because chameleons have prehensile tails, which means not only can they grab with their tails and use it as basically a 5th limb to move around the environment, they can actually support their entire body weight for short periods of time just on their tail. You can see just from the way they're able to sit on our hands like this that these animals are masterful climbers. And a lot of that comes down to their feet. They have incredible grip and actually quite sharp little claws. Their feet have this very peculiar shape to them. They kind of look like oven mitts, and it helps them wrap around branches and leaves and give them incredibly solid purchase. And one of the first things that a lot of people notice with chameleons are those eyes. Chameleons are primarily insect hunters, and those eyes are able to move completely independently from one another. So they can focus on some movement to the left, some movement to the right, and then when they spot a prey item that they really want to go for, that is when the eyes snap together and give them incredible binocular vision, which means that they can judge the distance between where they're sitting and where their prey is hanging out before they unleash their crazy secret weapon. The way they actually capture their prey is with their incredibly long tongues. They can shoot their tongue out up to twice the length of their body, and it has an incredibly sticky tip that allows them to basically grab whatever insect that they're looking at and pull it right into their mouth. It's absolutely amazing. They'll be out here eating all kinds of different insects, things like flies and beetles and moths. Basically anything small enough to fit in their mouths, they will definitely go for. And their bite isn't weak either. These guys have very sharp teeth, powerful jaws for crushing the hard shells of the invertebrates that they eat.
With all of these unbelievable hunting abilities, no arboreal insect is safe when there's a chameleon around. Between the crazy eyes, weird feet, and wild-looking bodies, though, you may be wondering how a lizard this bizarre could even exist. But it makes sense when you consider the challenges they have to overcome to survive life in the trees. Veiled chameleons aren't small lizards, but they spend almost their entire lives moving around on substrate that is thinner than their own bodies. They're basically balancing themselves constantly while they hunt, mate, and even sleep. That's why they have such oddly flattened bodies. The dorsolaterally compressed shape allows them to keep their center of gravity above the very thin branches they traverse, while they can use their zygodactylous feet and their prehensile tails in tandem to give them a stable hold even when they're moving, like a rock climber using a rope for added safety. These adaptations help them navigate their habitat effectively, but not quickly, so catching up to insect prey and avoiding predators like birds and snakes is no easy feat. And the survival pressure from their slow speed explains why they've evolved such unusual features. Their eyes being able to move independently gives chameleons a 360-degree field of view, which lets them spot prey or potential threats anywhere around them without needing to turn their bodies, while their projectile tongue lets them catch prey without having to close a lot of distance. Practically all chameleons have adaptations for tree climbing even if they've evolved secondarily to live on the ground, which leads many to call them the most truly arboreal reptiles on Earth. And this unique lifestyle is what has pushed their biology to the extreme. This is yet another example of how the craziest things we see in nature are actually the answers to life's most difficult challenges. But there's one more amazing feature these lizards have that we still have to break down.
All of these adaptations pale in comparison to what is by far the coolest, but the most misunderstood, I would say, definitely, adaptation that chameleons have, which is their iconic ability to change their colors. Now, the conventional wisdom about chameleon color changing is that they use it for camouflage to either hide from predators or ambush their prey. And though their green coloration does help them blend into the canopies where they're going to be hanging out in all of those leaves, their coloration actually does not serve as camouflage primarily. What they're really using it for is communication. And you can really get a sense for that if you look at how this little guy appeared when Evan first caught him. You saw that as soon as he was in Evan's hand, his color turned to that mix of bright yellow, really vibrant green, and a bunch of black spots covering his entire body. That mix of coloration and the speed at which he produced it is what let us know that he was both scared and quite upset to be pulled off of the branch there. And that is exactly how they use their coloration, both with a potential threat, but far more often to communicate with each other. One of the main ways they'll use their coloration is when two males are actually fighting to breed. They get very confrontational, the males get quite aggressive towards each other when they're competing for the right to mate with a female, and their coloration will reflect that. They'll get incredibly dark, especially around their heads, and the males can actually communicate their strength to one another using the coloration of their body, and particularly the stripes that form along their midsection. This is what I find really fascinating about chameleons. It's not as simple as dark means angry, light means calm. That is generally true, but there is so much intricacy to the way that they're able to communicate exactly what they're feeling and produce very specific messages to potential rivals. So as Evan was saying, the brightness of their stripes is one of the main tools that they use to not only indicate their mood, but the brighter the stripes are and the longer the chameleon displays them is an indication of how strong that chameleon's bite is at that moment. When they hold their stripes for a long time and they're super bright, they're advertising that they have lots of energy, a lot of strength stored up in those jaw muscles, so they are ready to defend themselves from any sort of potential threat. And what's absolutely fascinating about their communication is that the males will actually use it to judge whether or not it's worth fighting the rival male in front of them. If they see that the male is much stronger, he's much more confident in his abilities, a smaller subordinate male will know that he can't probably win against that super strong individual, and they'll move off without even initiating a physical conflict. It's actually a way for the chameleons to conserve a bit of their energy and only fight when they really think they'll have a chance to win. There are many levels to their communication that goes beyond just the basic colors that they're showing. And we haven't even scratched the surface. You can look at the coloration of the head to determine roughly how many fights the individual has won. You can look at where on their bodies they're displaying dark or light coloration to indicate further intricacies about their mood. There is so much that we don't understand about the higher levels of their communication with their color, and it is truly fascinating to watch them do it in real time. And the thing that really blows my mind about their color changing ability is how quickly they can do it. There are other lizards that have the ability to change the coloration of their bodies. Many, in fact. Green anoles, for example, one of the the native anole species here in Florida can change from a vibrant green or even kind of bluish coloration all the way to a complete matte brown. But that takes a good few minutes for them to fully make that switch. With a chameleon, they can change their coloration in just a few seconds. True, probably I would say they are the fastest and most adept of all color-changing reptiles. Now, the biology behind how they're able to change their color could be an entire video on its own. But we do want to talk about it a little bit because frankly, I don't know when the next time is we'll have chameleons in front of the camera, literally, much less in hand.
Color changing is the best tool chameleons have for communication and defense. But whether they're signaling to a rival or scaring off a threat, these things need to happen fast, which is why the method of color changing that works for anoles doesn't cut it for chameleons. There are a surprising number of reptiles that can modulate their color, but usually only by lightening or darkening it using specialized cells called melanophores, which contain melanin, the same pigment that gives our hair and skin their color. They can expand the pigment out to make themselves darker, or contract it into the center of the cell to lighten their body. But while chameleons do have melanophores, and it was once thought that they change all of their colors in this way, the real secret to this ability is a bit more complex. See, there are 3 layers of color cells in chameleon skin called chromatophores, and each one serves a different but vital function. Melanophores form the deepest layer, and they serve to make the displayed colors more or less visible depending on how much melanin is out. The top layer is made up of pigmented cells called xanthophores and erythrophores, which consistently reflect yellow and red light respectively and don't change color on their own. They make the chameleon's colors more vibrant and contribute to different color patterns on their body. The middle layer of chromatophores are the iridophores, the cells that actually change their color. And this is where it gets cool. To understand how iridophores work, it helps to have a quick refresher of wavelengths and how they affect the color of light. Physics describes light as behaving like a particle and a wave, and when acting as a wave, the distance between each peak is what we call a wavelength. As you move towards the warmer end of the color spectrum, wavelengths increase, and when you go to the cooler end, they decrease. So the longest wavelength of light that we can see is red, the shortest wavelength we can see is blue or violet. Now, what you're looking at is a microscopic view inside an iridophore, and all those white things are structures called guanine nanocrystals, which have the unique ability to reflect any color of light depending on how the crystals are arranged, and the organized layout of the nanocrystals is known as the crystal lattice. Groundbreaking research from Dr. Jérémie Teyssier and colleagues from the University of Geneva have revealed that the farther apart chameleons space their crystals in the lattice, the better they are at reflecting longer wavelengths like red and yellow. And the closer together the crystals are, the better they reflect shorter wavelengths like blue and green. Here you can see the nanocrystals close together in their relaxed state. So right now this individual would appear green, because the blue coloration reflected by the iridophores is combining with the yellow coloration of the xanthophores. However, when the lattice expands out, there's more distance between the crystals, and the chameleon would now appear red or orange. Chameleons can expand and contract the iridophore cells and manipulate the nanocrystals inside using special proteins in the cytoskeleton. And with the help of light-sensitive proteins in the skin called opsins, they can precisely tune the crystal lattice to reflect any wavelength of light that they want to in a matter of seconds, allowing them to create rapid communication signals. Where they produce the colors on their body is important for signaling too, and not every part of the body has equal distribution of chromatophores, which is how their complex patterns of stripes and blotches come about. Communication is a massive part of chameleon life, especially their courtship, reproduction, and self-defense. And that is what has driven them to evolve such a fantastic ability to communicate with their skin.
This is a lifer that is not only incredibly special to us, but is a big rite of passage for anyone who's interested in reptiles in Florida to come out and try and find some of these pretty rarely seen lizards, at least in this country. I am absolutely ecstatic to finally have lifer chameleons in hand. Nicely done, bro. This is one encounter I will not forget anytime soon. Definitely not.
There are over 200 species of chameleons in the world, but every one of them has figured out how to use their family's iconic adaptations to survive, which proves that they are definitely the right answers to the problems they face. Finding our first wild chameleons is something we will never forget. And when you figure out how their craziest features actually work, it makes them even more impressive. Their color changing is the true secret to their success, and their ability to communicate with it sets them apart from all other lizards. But they are not the only animals to have figured out how to use color this way. Hummingbirds are easily among the most famous and beautiful birds on Earth, and the things they can do with their coloration even give chameleons a run for their money. If you want to learn the fascinating stories behind how and why hummingbirds use their stunning hues and dive deep into many other unique aspects of their lives, check out this video, where we break down the insane biology of these incredible birds. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.